Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bianca Collins. I'm the curator of public programs for the Fowler Museum at UCLA. Thank you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where it is you're tuning in from around the world. The Fowler is proud to present today's program, The First Internet Message, as part of our Lunch and Learn series, which offers easily digestible explorations of charismatic objects from around the world. We're so pleased that you've joined us to chew on some sustenance and feed your mind and soul. Few cultural revolutions can trace their origins as precisely as the one that took place at 3420 Boelter Hall at UCLA on October 29th, 1969, the day the internet came into existence. Today, we are proud to welcome Professor Leonard Kleinrock, who developed the mathematical theory of packet networks, the technology that underpins the internet. The first node of the ARPANET, was established at Kleinrock's UCLA lab, and a new era of connectivity was born. The interface message processor log entry for the first message sent over the ARPANET is currently on view at the Fowler in communication systems in the global context. Please join the Fowler in welcoming Kleinrock, who will share the events surrounding that seminal moment at Boelter Hall, which has since been redesigned by Sebastian Clough, Fowler's Director of Exhibitions, as the Kleinrock Internet History Center. Leonard Kleinrock is Distinguished Professor of Computer at UCLA. He is considered a father of the internet, having developed its foundational technology as an MIT graduate student in '62. Kleinrock has served as Professor of Computer Science at UCLA since '63 and as Department Chair from '91 to '95. He has received 8 honorary degrees, published over 250 papers, authored 6 books, and has supervised the research of 50 PhD students. In 2007, Kleinrock received the National Medal of Science, the highest honor for achievement in science bestowed by the President of the United States. Before we get going, I have a quick technical bit of housekeeping. Once the screen sharing begins, I encourage you to click view options at the top of your screen and then select side-by-side mode so the video feed doesn't cover the presentation. And if you have any questions during this program, please do submit them through the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can submit and upvote questions that you'd like to be considered to be answered at the end of the program. All right, that's all from me. To you, Len.
Thank you very much, Bianca. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, good evening. I'd like to take you back, not to the origins of the universe, but to the origins of the internet, as Bianca just said. And this image behind me is the place where the internet began. Over my left shoulder, that gray box looks like a telephone booth, is the first piece of internet equipment ever. It's called an interface message processor, IMP, and you saw those letters in the opening screens. Let's take us through the history as to how all this began. So we're going to go backwards in time, and we're going to go through a simple slide presentation. So let's talk about the origins of the internet. First of all, let's go back to before the beginning. Indeed, a critical event happened in 1957-58. The planet created something called the International Geophysical Year, where scientists all over the world were examining our planet, the Earth, looking at the oceans, the mountains, the rivers, the continents, and there's a considerable amount of science there, and it was competition among nations. And of course, the Russians, not to be undone, during that period, in October, they launched Sputnik. And that little beep that was going around the Earth totally annoyed everyone on Earth because it means the Russians got to space first. And that deeply annoyed then President Eisenhower. And he said, the United States has lost its lead in technology. And he said, that will never happen again. And so just 4 months later, he created what was called the Advanced Research Projects Agency, in order to fund, support, foster technology, science, engineering, math across the United States, just funding schools, laboratories, research centers, etc. However, the Russians didn't stand still, and basically a little while after, a year and a half later, they launched a spacecraft that hit the moon. And shortly thereafter, a year and a half later, they put the first man in space. They beat us to space. Kennedy, a month and a half later, said, this is serious. So we have to set our goals way above where the Russians have been. We're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And in fact, it was then, in 1962, that I published the mathematical theory of data networks, as Bianca just told you. So at this point, notice, we have this advanced research projects agency funding science and technology in the United States. And here I've published the theory behind what would eventually become the internet. But the Russians didn't stop. In '66, they launched a spacecraft that hit Venus. And then finally, in July 1969, we put men on the moon. So we came back into the fore. So let's take us through that period and see what's going on. 1969, the year we put a man on the moon, it was an incredible year. Yes, we landed a man on the moon. Other things happened though. We had a bunch of crazies dancing around up in New York State in the Woodstock Festival. An event with probability 0 occurred. The Mets won the World Series. They were really down for a long time. Big event in New York. Boeing 747 took its first flight. There was a serious killing spree in Los Angeles. And oh, by the way, the internet was born. And guess what? Nobody noticed. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. And yet it probably had more impact than all those others on the history and future of the world, scientific world. So what did it look like in 1969? Well, before September 69, there was at UCLA a time-shared computer that I was running for the computer science department. And then finally, in September 69, ARPA, through its contracts, presented to UCLA the first node of the internet, this interface message processor. It's what you call a router today. It was that gray box I showed you. In fact, here's its picture again. Tall box. Here's a picture of the control panel. And if you look inside, it is so ugly, it's beautiful. That is the first router of the internet. So that happened in September 69. Again, UCLA host, the first IMP. In October 69, a month later, a second site received their IMP up at Stanford Research Institute, 350 miles to the north. They had their time-shared computer, they got their IMP and they connected the two. And this line, this high-speed line between UCLA and SRI was installed. It was the first piece of the backbone internet that we now enjoy. And how fast was that line? Well, it was a blazing 50,000 bits per second, which today is a joke. In those days, that was really high-speed broadband. And so we decided to keep a log at this point. This is the outside of the document that Bianca showed you before. We started keeping records in October 1969. An important entry is that picture you saw, that's on display at the Fowler right now. That is the original document. And I'd like to focus your attention on that particular entry. There it is. And it says that in October 29th, 1969, at 10:30 at night, we entered the only record of the first message of the internet. We said we talked to SRI host to host, computer to computer. And that entry was made by one of my graduate students, Charlie Klein, CSK. And the setup was this, as I said. We had the UCLA computer, the first router, the first high-speed line, the second router, and the second host, and we sent the message between the two. So the question is, here is the first message on the internet ever. We didn't have a camera, we didn't have a tape recorder, we just made that entry. The question is, what was that first message? Now, I suspect many of you know what it is, but in case that you don't, let's go through it. The question is, did we have a well-prepared message, one with significance, one with impact, a catchy phrase? For example, the first telegraph message, Samuel Moore said, "What hath God wrought?" A catchy phrase, we all remember it. First telephone message by Bell, "Watson, come here, I need you." Or certainly Armstrong, "Man on the Moon, one giant leap for mankind." Those guys were smart. They understood public relations, the press, the media. They had these wonderful messages ready. Did we? Heck no. All we wanted to do was to log in from UCLA to SRI to test the way this fledgling network would perform. And the way it was supposed to perform is you sit at one computer, log into a remote computer through this network, and use the services of that remote computer remotely, which is what we do every day today. In those days, it was significant. So in order to do that, we have to log in. And to log in, we had to type LOG, and the remote machine is smart enough to know what we're doing. They'll type the IN. So here we go. Here's the setup. It's one I showed you. This was Charlie Klein, one of my graduate students. This was Bill Duval up at SRI. And in order to make sure we knew what was going on, I mean, what does it mean to send packets and data to a network? How do you see it? So we had a telephone connection. We used a telephone connection between the two to understand what's going on. And the irony is magnificent. We're using a telephone network to create a new data network, which is going to destroy the telephone network. But in fact, that was the setup. So Charlie sent the first L. He said, "You get the L?" And Bill said, "Yep, got the L." Sent the first O. "You get the O?" "Yep, we got the O." We sent the G. "You get the G?" Crash. The network went down. So the first message ever on the network, on the internet, was low. That's the answer to my question. What was that first message? A more powerful, more succinct, more prophetic message we could not have asked for. So instead of preparing an excellent message, we accidentally fell into perhaps the most powerful message you can imagine. And of course, shortly thereafter, I pointed out that that really is, lo and behold, look what's coming. It's a prophecy. Now, that event caused Werner Herzog to create a documentary movie called Lo and Behold. And you can find it on Netflix. And if I'm going to show you the opening scenes of that particular. Let's enter this very special place. That machine over there is the first piece of internet equipment. This is a military hardened machine. It has a unique odor, and it was from here that the first message was sent. A revolution began. So indeed, the internet was born that day. Let's follow it through now. We're right now at the Fowler Museum showing that particular first log entry. And there's the Fowler Museum on a UCLA map. But of course, this happened down in Boelter Hall. So let's walk down to Boelter Hall and see, in fact, what's going on there. You just were in that room watching me bang on the computer. And also you saw it in the background of my presentation. But this is part of the engineering building. And if you go to the right of this building, you find a long hallway, which ends in a stairway. And if you look at these doors on the left and focus on them, if you enter this little entrance here, you'll find the floor. The mosaic on the floor is not the usual boring mosaic in university hallways. It's a rather interesting piece of artwork, if you will. And if you climb up those stairs, that's what the upper piece looks like. Now, what is that? Well, it turns out there was a wonderful architect who created that floor. His name is Eric Hagen. Here's the plans he had. And he laid this out and he left it there and didn't tell anybody what it meant. A year later, an undergraduate computer science student walking through this hallway day after day recognized what it was. He said, "That's a sequence of binary digits. Black is 0, yellow is 1. And if you decode these letters, it spells out lo and behold." So Eric left this Easter egg for us. You should go there. It's in the bottom of Boelter Hall. You'll find it. So let's watch the growth of the internet. From 1969, when it was launched, and it looked like that, you see UCLA node number 1, SRI node number 2 in October. In November, UC Santa Barbara. In December, University of Utah. That was the original 4-node network, which we tested. And from that day on, through to 1988, which was this now a rather much larger network in the United States, what was going on? Well, the network grew rapidly, friendly, broadly, until 1988. Robert Morris, a graduate student, unleashed the first internet virus. It spread across portions of the network and annoyed us. And we said, uh-oh. And then, unfortunately, we then said, oh, well, this is an aberration. Crazy graduate student, let's ignore it. Big mistake. From 1988 to 1994, the network continued to grow, and some very significant things happened. The dot-coms came online in the early 90s, late 80s. The backbone network went to gigabit speeds thanks to Al Gore, what he called the infrastructure, the internet superhighway. The web began to roll out in the early 90s until 1994, Lawrence Cantor and Martha Siegel, two lawyers, introduced spam. This was a broad-based spam message. It went to almost all the computers in the internet. And again, we said, uh-oh, and this time we said, ouch, something's going on. A bad thing's going on. And so it was a deliberate mass posting of spam email. And if you've never seen the first spam email, there it is. That's a picture of it. It was sent out on April 12th, 1994. They announced there's going to be a green card lottery, and they said, hire us. We're a couple of lawyers. They were advertising their services on our research engineering network. They were not allowed to do this. How dare they? So we sent messages back to them. Stop, cease and desist. You mustn't do this. We're going to stop you. We sent so much email back to them, we took down their server. So as an unintended consequence of the first spam email, we created the first denial of service attack. Well, something bad had basically already happened now. I asked myself, what happened to the internet I knew for the first 20 years? It was a miraculous creation, capable of unbelievable magnificence, and it's been hijacked by these people to sell detergent. Indeed, in 1995, there were 50 million users worldwide. They were consumers. Commercial world recognized that. They said it's a powerful shopping machine. It's a gossip chamber. It's an entertainment channel. It's a social club. And so what happened is the internet took a left turn and suddenly became a money-making machine and introduced what we now call the dark side of the network, all the annoyance that you see, all of the denial of service, all of the spam, all of the advertising, all of the terrible things we see on the network. So what does the future hold for us? If you ask yourself, what's going to be the infrastructure? What's going to be the guts of the internet in the future? It's easy to predict. There's going to be nomadic computing where wherever you go, you can connect easily. Ubiquitous computing, intelligent software agents doing your bidding, informing you of information. Embedded technology, they're going to use this technology to deploy the internet into the infrastructure, into the walls, the desk, your cars, your fingernails. It will disappear. The internet will be everywhere and invisible. Intelligent devices, smart spaces, wherever you go, it'll be intelligent. Internet of Things making this happen. And of course, virtual and augmented reality. Indeed, a way to phrase all of that is to say, the internet is going to become a pervasive global nervous system. Wherever you go, it will be invisible, it'll be there, you'll be able to interact with it, with voice, with gestures, with haptics, etc. So that's what the internet is going to look like. However, if we ask what will be the applications and services that are going to roll out, that's very hard to predict. In fact, in the 50 years of the internet, we've been terrible at predicting the applications and services. For example, they've continually surprised. We never saw email coming. It happened soon. It took over the network. World Wide Web suddenly took center. Peer-to-peer file sharing, blogs, didn't see that happening. User-generated content, YouTube, etc. Nobody saw that happening. Search engine dominance, shopping engines, social networking, distributed ledgers, blockchain, cryptocurrency, reputation systems, circles of trust exploration. Nobody saw those things happening. When they hit fast. They came out of the blue, unanticipated, and they exploded and took over our attention. So basically, what we've created a global system for constantly shocking us with surprises. And in fact, that's a good thing. There's opportunity for new applications and services to roll out. The current generation, new generation, the opportunity is unbounded for all these applications and services and new infrastructure as well. So it is an untold and a beautiful future we're seeing here, along with the dark side, which we have to manage. Now, an important question is, how important were all the people who contributed to what I just showed you? All those early pioneers, the installers, the application developers. My point is, none of them needed to have been born. This internet would have appeared if none of those early pioneers had been born. In fact, this idea was in the air. It was waiting for the technology to catch up with the vision. And that vision, believe it or not, was articulated originally back in 1908 by Nikola Tesla, where he talked about just this kind of a system where you'd be able to get access to remote devices and people instantly with a tiny device anywhere in the world. And you could send pictures, data, voice, text, etc. So the vision was there. We had to wait for the technology to catch up. It did catch up, and here we have the internet. So we've come a long way. Or have we? Thank you very much. Very happy to have done this.
Thank you so much, Len. Gosh, that's such interesting information, and it's so awesome to hear that so much of it happened here at UCLA. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
My pleasure. And don't forget, you can enter this room 3420 in Boelter Hall, and we'd be happy to give you a tour.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so we've got some questions that have been submitted. We're gonna have time for about 8 minutes of audience question and answer. So if you have any questions for Len, please do submit them right now. Okay, so we've got a question from Mike O'Brien, and he wants to know, was the first message sent from a host connected to the IMP, or was the teletype connected directly to the IMP?
Good question. It was a user terminal, in this case it was a teletype, connected to the host computer as a local terminal using that time sharing system, that local computer. But it went through, that host computer was connected to the, in fact, this picture, this is a mock-up of the original host. This particular gray panel is an original, that is a control panel. And there was a cable from this computer to the IMP. And the terminal that we're talking about was sitting right where my body is, connected to this, to the IMP, and out across the network. So the answer is through the host.
Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, there's an example of a teletype behind me right there.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you. Did you have to make your own cables, Gloria's wondering?
Well, if you mean the cables for the backbone network, the answer is no. We leased high-speed cables from AT&T, and they were using that for their voice network. And the voice network used switches called circuit switches. We ripped those circuit switches out. We put in our packet switches to transfer data instead of simply voice. And the interesting point is, in the early 60s, I said in 1962, I published the mathematics for how this should all work. Mm-hmm. And I went to AT&T. I said, look, AT&T, you have to create a data network, and here's how to do it. And AT&T said, it won't work. And even if it does work, we want nothing to do with it. So they basically stiff-armed us. And yet here we are using their cables to implement the network, which is going to take down their voice network.
So funny how life works. All right, so John, he calls it a minor quibble, but I think you can just clarify for us. He's noting that there's a difference between Usenet and the internet, USENET, and he's saying that he believes that all Usenet nodes were on the internet at that time. Do you understand what he's talking about, and can you explain the conflation?
Yes, there was, in the early days, I showed you that 4-node network among universities, and then it expanded. And who was allowed on that network? The answer is, in this case, sites that were being funded by ARPA. And they were mostly universities and research labs. But some universities were not funded by ARPA. And the question is, how could they get on? And how could some of these user groups that were formed, for example, once we provided access to graduate students at those universities, they reached out to others through the network and formed these focus groups, like groups that were interested in cooking, in astronomy, in ham radio, in traveling, and they would form their groups, and they created their own network, which was attached to the internet. So it was these networks which are not directly attached came in through the user group. And there was another kind of network evolved called CSNet, Computer Science Network, where universities that were not attached to the internet could come in through their own access. So there was very soon other networks began to attach to the ARPANET, and from that we created the multiple network called the internet.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Okay, so Charlie wants to know, what are your thoughts on Web3? And I must confess, I'm not even aware of what Web3 is. How would you define it? And what do you think the inherent vulnerabilities will be?
Well, Web3 is an attempt to emphasize virtual and augmented reality, where you live in cyberspace as opposed to in real space, in meat space. And there's a lot going on there. People are spending real money to buy virtual assets, which are then trade and enlarge and use. So there's a world out there where virtual reality is in fact beginning to catch on. The gamers have been playing the virtual reality for a long time. So this metaverse that's beginning to emerge, and it's beginning to become a significant part of Web3, is rolling out. It's not yet caught a lot of steam, but it is a move, and people are learning to live in the augmented reality, which is a combination of physical, internet, and virtual, if you will. So it's a move which we're watching take place right now.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got some fun questions, but I want to do one more technical one first. Both David and Gloria are interested in learning more about packet sharing. How did
packet switching, you mean?
Sorry, packet
switching.
Packet switching. Okay, yeah, both of them.
You could say swacket pitching, but that's wrong.
Okay. So packet switching. So who at how did you come to invent it, and who at MIT and UCLA did what?
Okay. As a graduate student at MIT, I was looking for a problem to do my PhD research on. And I was surrounded by computers. And I saw that these computers could not communicate. So I decided sooner or later they'll want to talk to each other. And there was no adequate technology which will allow data communications efficiently on the voice network. So I had to design the architecture for a network which transferred data. And so that's what I laid out, the mathematics of what that was. I did that for my PhD. There was other work going on at RAND Corporation at about the same time. Paul Barron was talking about the architecture of a network which could withstand a nuclear attack. And he came up with some similar ideas. And some years later in England, Donald Davies came up with an idea using the things that I and Paul had done. So the theory was put together at MIT and also at RAND. However, in the mid-60s, ARPA, who had been funding many research centers, decided they wanted to create a network so these research centers could communicate. And if I wanted to use the machine at Utah, which was excellent in graphics, I didn't have to import all the capability from Utah. I could remotely access it, log in, and use it there. So in order to make that happen, I needed a network. ARPA sent out a request for proposal to industry to make that switch, which we specified, our mathematicians and the folks at ARPA specified it. They said, industry, go build it. A group in Cambridge, Mass, some people out of MIT and MIT Lincoln Lab put that switch together and deployed it. So that's where the theory and the physical technology came. UCLA was chosen to be the first node of the network because I was there with all the expertise on what this network should look like. And I had students already working on this. So UCLA became the first site. And a lot of the work was done at UCLA to create the protocols by which these machines could talk to each other. We had a wonderful software group creating the host-host protocol. We formed something called the network working group. So the answer is a lot of work was done at UCLA, and the graduate students at UCLA and those around the country that formed their own group, this network working group. So the theory started early in the universities. The deployment came at UCLA, and the graduate students then worked together to get the protocols. And eventually that became the internet when many networks got attached. That's a long-winded answer. I hope it clarifies some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so last question. People want to know, what's your favorite thing to come out of the internet / what is your favorite internet trend or application?
Well, before this switch appeared at UCLA, UCLA put out a press release, and it's those 2 white pages there, the 2-page press release, in which I'm quoted as articulating a vision. And I articulate a lot of what's happening today. One thing I articulated, which has not yet happened, and that is that this network will become invisible. These cell phones do not make the network invisible. There's too much tiny keyboards, complex protocols, passwords, and all the rest. So the invisibility has to happen. But the thing that I totally missed in my vision was that my 99-year-old grandmother would be on the internet at the same time as my 5-year-old granddaughter some years ago. I missed the social networking side, which is now dominating the application. So in some sense, my favorite application is email, which began the social networking side. It's the most powerful, connecting people instead of computers. That's what the internet is really doing these days.
Right.
What was the second half of the question? What I liked the most? And
yeah, like what's your favorite trend that you've seen? I mean, I guess social networking would be one, but
it is, but what I really feel needs to happen is to find a way to deal with the dark side of the network. The serious misinformation, the spam, the denial of service, the invasion of privacy. That's a tremendous task. And we're going to have to work as a community, not just the scientists, not just the high-tech companies providing the services, not just the government, but you, the users, have to start complaining about the bad stuff that's happening out there and articulate what it is you're willing to put up with, and then force those companies. If some company comes to you and says, here's the privacy policy we're going to give you, we're going to stick on you, they won't often make it clear what they're doing. And you say, but here's the one I want. And if they don't match, walk away or negotiate to get the privacy policy to match the one you want. And they can customize the privacy policy. They argue, we can't give everybody their customized privacy policy. The answer is, sure you can. You certainly customize the ads you give me. You know exactly who and what I am. You could match my privacy policy. So I feel that's the biggest challenge that needs to be worked on, the dark side.
Thank you so much for your time today, Leonard. This was such an interesting half hour, and I so thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today.
My pleasure.
And thank you to everyone who joined us. This program has been recorded. It will be available immediately on our Facebook for everyone who's asking. And in a few days, it will be also uploaded onto our Instagram and onto our Fowler website for you to revisit and share however you see fit. And we hope that you'll join us again for our next program. You can find details on this closing slide. In the meantime, hope you have a great day. Thank you. See you next time.